That's all right. It's Grahola. There it is.
Everybody, welcome back to the DesignerCon main stage. It's sponsored this year by our friends over at Sony Pictures Animation.
Yeah.
Was anybody here for the Pictionary at the Pros that we just did?
Yes, I did.
It was a good time, right? It was fun. Well, right now we're going to mix it up with a conversation. Across from me, I have three different gentlemen that all work in the entertainment industry. Yep. Currently, each of them find themselves working in animation in one level or another, and we want to have a conversation about taking animation seriously.
When you're doing live
action, I think in all of our lives, we've seen this medium slowly evolve, and there's a lot of different expectations
making sure that a smoke simulation looks as realistic as possible because it has to fit into a live action plate.
So right next to me, I have Pav. Pav, do me a favor and say your last name for me. I don't speak the Australian so well.
Like Spider-Verse, especially, where we didn't actually
do
much simulation.
I'll trust you on that.
It was more hand-drawn.
So Pav, you are in FX, correct?
So it's definitely a
FX supervisor,
shift
and
you
worked in live before you came to animation.
You design more.
What was that transformation like? Because if I had to guess, in live, it's got to look real. But in animation, it's got to look exciting or tell the story or tone, right? You have a bit more freedom in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole premise of the film was to make a film that looks like a comic book, right? So we had to be really careful with all that really subtle detail of like halftones, line work, which is a huge part of comic books, right? So I actually developed a whole bunch of tools that would allow us to do line work on 3D
Spider-Verse is that
which is something that we
so
never
many
really
textures
did
added to the
wasn't
movie,
done
and not necessarily like a texture, like a
brush
brushstroke for a shadow on a character. There was just halftones going across the screen, and just so much texture and things we hadn't seen before. And as I was watching it, the design part of my brain said this was written, animated, and then it was designed. Like there was a level of graphic design that was going all over the top of it. You don't get that same luxury in most live features, correct? Right. Right.
Well, we were in a position where that mandate actually came from the top. So it was the people like the VFX supervisor, the production designer, the directors, they were all in. They were like really like, we want this. And it was actually quite hard in some ways for us to put aside the way we did things traditionally
on old
and kind of embrace that.
Every little detail was put in there. And so
we
my
definitely want
question
to do
is
that. We just couldn't figure out how. And that was kind of like the biggest challenge of how do we take all these tools that we've used on multiple projects,
every
all this
animation
knowledge
no,
that we
we're going to
have
do
on how
something
to do
different. We're going
things,
to do traditional
and in some ways just kind of like
animated.
discard that and try something totally different.
We're going to show,
and that was probably the hardest thing
separations
for
and how it
us.
absorbs into the paper. Was it easy to convey that that's what needed to be done for this project? Oh. Nice. Nice.
Yeah, totally. I'm really excited about that. Like, that's one of the things, like, my background is actually fine art. So I come from a fine art background, and I've gone through to a more technical position in my professional work. But I actually love the idea of bringing a lot of those artistic kind of like artistic flourishes and like and goals into the 3D realm. That's what I really love.
Well, it worked out amazing, and it's such a fun project to see.
Doing
and
good.
I think
Thank you.
something like that shows a level of attention to detail that animation can be a lot of different things. And with taking traditional animation, combining it with computers, we're just sort of scratching the surface on what's possible for the decades to come. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For me, the difference between live action and animation is really the process is so different. What I love about animation and why I stuck with it is like the camaraderie. It's so everyone can contribute
I mean,
to the
our
project.
work's so different when it has
That's
to
not
move
like that
and
in
live
live
and
action. There's
breathe
few
and tell
key
a story
people who
and
are
be a
really
character that we can all
driving the
relate with.
project in animation.
Kurt, how you doing, bud?
You've got prop designers.
Kurt, you come
and
to us
story
from
artists,
production,
and everyone
correct?
can contribute
A
because you have
producer.
so much
When
time
you
to do
first
it.
got
It takes years to
into
make these
producing
things.
your
It's really
first animated
collaborative. That's my favorite
projects,
part.
how different did that feel from live for you? Was there a little bit more of a convincing, like, were people sort of apprehensive? I mean, did you get hit up with, who is this project for? Do people drill down a layer to understand exactly what they're committing to?
That's true. You're right. You're literally creating everything. Every asset within it, every shot in the movie, nothing is dictated to you. You have the chance, which makes it hard too,
Right.
because literally you can do anything. The opportunity to make it perfect.
Right. And it's part of the camaraderie that you're all starting from a baseline of zero. Like New York City doesn't exist. Like, well, we're gonna go film in New York for 3 weeks. Like, you're literally building a world to tell a story in. And is that part of the camaraderie that, hey, right now, day one, we have nothing and we have to build it together?
I mean, the process we try to do is through the storyboarding, which you just saw with those talented artists, we effectively make the film before we make the film. Because you do it with their drawings and scratch actors, sometimes real actors, you lay in music and sound effects. You create the whole film in that kind of
with
sketchy
the different
way.
timeline, though, you do have
And the
a
goal
bit
there is to make it play.
from a producer's
you're
role,
caring
there
about
is
the
more time,
characters,
right, to
feeling
get in
the
there
emotion
and
you
make it a
wanna
little
feel,
bit more
set
precise
pieces
than
designed
live
so that when
action
you go
where
to
you've only
create
got your
the shots
crew
with
in a certain
these talented artists, you
geographic
do it
location
once
for X
because
amount
it's
of days.
incredibly
and
expensive
you got
to make every
real
shot. So
actors
you
that have
don't
to
want
be in a
anything
spot
on the
at a
cutting
certain
room
time.
floor
So for
that's
production,
lit
do you have that
animation.
little bit of extra flex of we can push a little bit more in this direction to get it to feel right?
Exactly. I mean, early screenings of Mitchell's. You might have been at one. We had the one downstairs in the corner building where Cody was there. Anyway,
Yep.
and it was like 20 of us probably, and it was a different version of the movie that came out, but it was played. People are laughing and enjoying themselves. Like once you get the room going, laughing, then you feel like, okay, this is gonna work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's up, buddy?
All right. You are working on. Right. So, Kurt, when you're watching the rough version, right? I bet you know that you
Correct.
struck gold when you start ignoring how shitty it looks and how great it feels. We're on to something here. Kevin, my man. All right. You are working on a rated
It's a couple firsts for us at Sony Animation.
project.
People know if you look
So
at
the easy way
the
to say is like,
various
hey, can we take
things on
animation
the wall,
serious?
you'll
Well, you're
see
working on a project
we're known
for
mostly
adults,
for our big
right?
budget CG kind of feature
But what
films.
I'm
and
excited
there's two
about is
firsts
I've been
with this
meeting
project
with
called Agent
Sony for a
King.
while to pull all this off.
One,
They kept
it
telling me
is
they
our
had a
first
project. And they kept
R-rated,
saying King, and I was thinking, oh, it's
content
the
made
prince
for
doesn't
adults,
want to
and two,
take
it's
his
our
dad's
first,
job. He's
animated
worried that he
series that
can't
we've
lead the
developed.
kingdom.
So
And then I come
lots
in
of things
here
to
and I look
figure
at that
out,
one piece of
but,
artwork, and I
you
realize,
know,
Kevin, you're working
it's
on a
been
project
blast,
for my
just
king,
trying to figure
the
out
king that I
the
observe.
pipelines.
What is it
and
like
get
to
out of our
work
comfort
for
zones
Netflix?
as filmmakers?
It's a series. We've
to
got
be
several
able
episodes,
to,
and we're
you
going
know,
for the first time for
tell
Sony
adult,
Pictures Animation.
do
a
adult
strictly
humor and
adult
tell
title.
dirty jokes.
How
if
was
you will.
it to sit in that project?
But
Like, okay,
yeah, it's just
we're going
it's a
adult
different,
now, and this is a whole
you're
different
doing
set
it
of
for a
rules
different
and
audience, and it really
expectations.
allows you to just scratch those itches of like stories that you want to tell. And then the process of making a television program, an animated television program, is just slightly different than features. You know, you were talking about the production schedule, and really like in features, you make the movie And you kind of have it done before you really go in and spend all the money.
Right.
In TV, it's like it's the same thing, but you just have to do it much faster and have it figured out. So it's driven a lot. This show in particular is driven a lot by the scripts and the writing, and so that's similar to live action. And then once you get going and you figure out the tone, then you're just plowing through it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us it was, first of all, it's animation, so anything is possible, and because it's Netflix and it's rated for mature audiences, which means you can pretty much do
Right.
anything you want. We found ourselves just pushing. Like, if you think a joke has gone too far, take it another 20%, and you've hit the mark of the show. You know, so. It took a little while in figuring out the action and the tone and the style, but once you kind of get in that rhythm, you kind of know what your sandbox is to play in. And again, like in animation,
When you've worked
can
on
do
animated projects in the
anything
past,
we want. So
I'm
anything
sure
we
there
could
were
think of and
moments where like,
visualize
this
that made
feels
sense to the
too
stories and
adult
to
or
the
too violent
characters,
or too sexual.
we just went for
We
it.
need to scale it
Did
back.
Netflix ever tell you
This time
no?
around, did you find yourself
I've never
scaling
asked
the
you this.
other
Did they
way?
ever
Like,
say,
is there a
like,
more
that's too far,
mature,
dude?
more adult way to tell the story or to
Nope.
get this joke across?
They did not. And to be fair, and Sony supported that as well. I mean, that if you're gonna go
Right.
for it, go for it. You know, so.
I'm in. That's great.
Yeah, luckily we had a
Pav,
lot
as
of
a
really good
illustrator, I
art
have
from
a
the
question
art
for you
department
in
at
that,
Spa.
you know,
So they would provide us
what
really
makes
clear
graphic
goals of
design
like, this is the
sometimes really
style,
beautiful
we don't want to
is
deviate
it's
too much
designed
from
within
this.
constraints,
And a lot of the
right?
times what
and
we
it's
do
sort
is
of making it
with
fit
CG
in the
rendering,
box
because
is how you
rendering is
figure out the
based
perfect
on
thing
like
to put on the
algorithms,
box.
mathematical
So when you were
algorithms.
working on a
You get a
project
lot of
like
realism
Guardians,
that's
right?
undesired
You
in a
worked on
film like
Guardians of the Galaxy,
Spider-Verse.
and it's
So you
it's
want to
live
cut
action,
that
but
back
it's a
and
lot of
replace
CGI.
that
There's a
realism
certain way that has to
with
look.
design
But then you go
and
over to
artistic
Spider-Verse,
kind of like,
where it's kind of
just,
unlimited.
like,
Can that
artistic
be a little
goals,
bit of a
you know,
hindrance where
and
there's
vision,
too
artistic
many
vision.
options? Like,
So
is
what
it
would happen is
smart
we
to
get
set
a
up a
lot of
style
notes
guide and
from
say,
the
we'll go
production
this far,
designer, the
but we won't
directors,
go past that because then our
there's
story
way too much
crumbles,
detail on
because
this side
just
of the
because
face.
everything's
This
possible
side of the face
doesn't
can
mean you
all be
want to
cut
throw
down to be like
everything
a
in there,
flat
correct?
color, and all of a sudden it's like it's a really amazing educational process because you're witnessing taking CG looking imagery and turning it into a frame that looks like Spider-Verse, right? And it's like, that's such an amazing thing to be a part of because you're in those reviews daily and you're seeing what it takes to go from standard looking CG into Spider-Verse style frames. And it's very educational from artistic perspective.
That is correct. Rub it in, man. No, I'm just kidding.
He started when he was 12.
Right.
That's a great question. I think so. I think we've always been supported by the studio. What's interesting about Sony is it's primarily a live action studio. We were kind of started as like a division within the live action studio.
Yeah. Kevin, you're one of the very
but I
first
think as we've
employees
had
at Sony Pictures Animation,
successes,
right?
it's been more and more of a mandate of
Didn't mean to
like,
call you
yeah,
out.
do more, keep pushing
But
the medium itself into different
So in
kinds
that
of
time
projects.
period, as the company's evolved.
Yeah, again, we've always been
some
supported,
big
but
wins and things have,
I think
you know,
the fun thing about
different
Sony
projects
Animation,
have
if you
come in that kind
again
of
look at
keep
the stuff on the
setting the
wall,
bar for a
is
new standard.
all of our
Have you
projects are
seen
different. We
even
don't
Sony
particularly
itself
have this
take
visual
this
house
small
style, and it's
division of the
all
company
creator-driven.
way
And
more
when we
serious
bring in
as you brought a little
a
thing called an
creator, a
Oscar back
director, a
home.
writer, and say, what kind of movie do you want to make? We really just try to give them the resources and say, you could do anything. You could assemble the team
Right.
or give any kind of look that you want to do. And so that's been fun because every movie is different, every experience is different. It's a challenge because we tend to reinvent the
Right.
wheel every time. It's story driven, but it means we can try anything, and that's what's really fun. And as you've mentioned, as we've been more successful, especially the recent successes, it's kind of like all bets are off. You guys go make great movies.
Right.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that. I think it's trying to make him, because it's animation, we have the opportunity, and there is no house style. We can do whatever the
Right,
filmmaker
story-driven.
wants, is try to make them as specific as possible. You know, and I think we're seeing
Right.
that in Spider-Verse for sure, 1 and 2, and then the Mitchells as well. Like, it's just, they're very different films, but we used a lot of the same tools that Imageworks had developed and turned
Yeah.
the knobs
Kurt,
the other
when
way
you're
for
looking
Mitchells,
at
and we're
animated
allowing
features, right?
the
You're
filmmakers
getting
to
into
make
producing
very
something.
specific
What do you think that
design
you're
choices,
looking
which
for
make the
that
movie
a
feel
live-action
truly
producer
unique?
isn't
You
looking
know,
for?
that's
Like, you've got to have a trained
it's to the
eye,
art
right,
of
to figure out how to
animation, like
really
trying
pull
to
these
push
stories
that
off.
further and
There's got to
further
be
every
a couple
time.
of nuanced differences from, you know, live action versus what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, it's just so amazing to think about all of these things come from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think like
So
live
in the
action,
nuance, instead
you're
of
looking
trying to make a
at
live action movie that fits into a world,
many different
you're
aspects,
actually looking for a project
the tone
where you
of
can
the
build a world.
project,
Is that the way
and
that I'm
kind
hearing
of the
it?
promise of like
Yeah.
who the
I mean,
characters
it's
are
just
and
so
what the
amazing to
world
think
is.
about all of these
but I think
things
the
come
biggest
from
thing that
nowhere,
we start
right?
with
Like it's
is
all an
just
imagination
understanding
until
why
it's 90
animated.
minutes of action that we're
because,
looking at.
You know, I think there was a
Kevin,
point
when
during
you're
the
looking
pandemic
at
where
a
everything was kind of
project
shut
for
down, and all of a
yourself,
sudden animation
what are you
became
looking
the
for in
only
projects
kind of gig in town for a
that
little
you
bit.
think you could deliver to
And so we were hearing a lot of
storytellers in our
ideas
audience
that
that are here
were
today and
great,
listening?
come
Like,
from
if
great
somebody's a
places,
storyteller
but
because you
it
are
was
a
like, oh, was that just a live
story-first
action script
studio,
that somebody
what
transposed
compels
for
you to say,
animation, and why?
that's a story that I want
and
to
that's
get
okay,
involved
but
in?
I think the why is it animated is the biggest question we ask, right? Because in a world where you can tell anything and make anything look like it has to like have it has to have that moment where you're like, oh, I get why this is the only medium that will that this story can be told in. But all of the other regular stuff, we want interesting characters that are relatable, we want crazy worlds, we want the right themes, and all of that stuff is important. But I always start with, why does it need to be told in this medium?
Right.
Absolutely.
great.
I mean, if you look at the credits of all our movies, there's 500, 600 names. It's almost like, why put all those people through it? These guys are very busy. They're the best kind of storytellers for what they do, and so those stories have to also fit,
Right.
you know, the people working on them as well.
That is such a great tidbit of This movie could be made several different ways. Why are we animating it? And I'm sure in there, that's when you start to discover that style guide, that visual language, because it could only be done this way. And then that starts to create the building blocks, right, for everything else.
It's a good question. I think, yeah, it's all about franchises these days. I mean, if you look around you, you'll see everybody's doing some sort of Baby Yoda thing or something,
Sony
right?
does so many different projects.
So yeah, it just depends on the project too. Like some things
there's
can be
not like a
smaller
downline
scale.
assembly line.
Again,
Well,
we're
it's gotta be great
experimenting
in the
with more
theater,
modest
but it also
budget,
has to
smaller
work on Main
movies
Street
that
USA
are
and the
really
theme
story
park, right?
driven
Like,
and
these
maybe
things all
not
go different
the
places.
Hotel
How much
Transylvanias
do
of the
you
world where you
incur
could
sort of
franchise
look at
it. But
projects you're getting involved
Hotel
in,
Transylvania
worry
is
about
it's nice to have
what
those in your
is
pocket as well.
the merchandise
You
appeal
know,
to
so
this? How
I
does
think
this
what's
IP
good is,
live beyond these 90
you know,
minutes? Is there
as
a
a
home
studio
for
as a
this in
whole, yeah, we're
consumer
always
goods,
looking
or
for
can
things
we
that
turn
can,
it into a
that
series?
can
Like, do you
just
do you really
transcend
try to
even
think
just
about
the
10
film
steps
itself.
ahead before you commit
You
to
know,
something?
toys,
Or is it,
consumer
if the story's
products,
so
like you
good,
say,
that shit doesn't matter?
and branching out into games. I mean, also Sony, we have PlayStation, we have all of these other avenues to explore these characters. So it is important, but at the same time, we're not afraid to tell stories that might not fit within every single one of those boxes, right?
I think that's a special thing about Sony because, like you said, we don't have the house style. We don't have a brand to protect in the same way that Disney does. So we can take more risks out there with the projects. And I think, too, we have, those different price points. There's a Spider-Verse is a big deal, and then there's different things with the series and features that are modestly budgeted in the middle, and you can take more chances with those.
And I love that too, where it's like not everything has to fit into that assembly line of
Right.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna do some custom stuff, and there's some pretty cool toy stores, toy creators around here that can do.
Right.
Check out DesignCon23 for more Elvis.
Hey, I actually have a question for you
Yeah.
guys because I'm not part of the same world that you guys live in. How do you find projects? Do artists, like directors, approach you, or do you?
And I love that
approach,
too, where it's like
already
not everything
content
has
that's
to
already
fit
out there?
into that assembly line of.
I'll start,
It's
but then
good,
I think
but
you
does
should
an
talk
action figure,
about
you know?
Mitchell's
And
and
it's
how
like
that
if
came
you're
to be.
making the
But,
movie to sell the
you know,
toy,
we're pretty
that's
open.
obviously
We're
going to really
a movie
hinder
studio,
how you
and
tell
so
those stories. I mean,
you know, a lot of
probably
people in the
wouldn't do a
industry know to
rated
come to
R or
us,
a
and so
mature
we'll get
series for
submissions from
Netflix, right? If we're
agents
worried
and
about selling a bunch
writers,
of
and
Elvis
we also
action figures,
know
although
a lot
I'm
of people
interested in
the
purchasing
industry
if you
as
do
well.
make
So
some.
So creators come to
Nice.
us with ideas, or we find a book that we're into, or there's an older property that we're like, wow, I wonder if somebody's doing anything with this because that would really fit into
I'm
our
ready for
brand.
it. I'm
We think
absolutely
stories
ready
and
for
good
it.
ideas can come from anywhere. So we're always on the lookout for new places to find content. Yeah. But yeah, Mitchell's was a very interesting story in particular.
It was a time when Mike Moon was an executive at Sony, and he brought Mike Rianda over just as a talent. He hadn't conceived of Mitchell's yet. Mike had worked on Gravity Falls, and they had known each other from there. And Mike came to Sony and came up with the idea on a road trip to see his parents up in Salinas, and then started writing, pitched the idea to Mike Moon, started writing, and it just kind of kept growing from there. It was the things he loved most, his crazy family and killer robots. So exactly, so that's it started from his mind, and that's wonderful when you have like a creator-driven film because it makes it so much easier. Pav knows, he worked on it. Like Mike was the guy who had the answers. Like if it was like, what should that effect look like? He could have an answer for that. What should the inside of the family's kitchen look like? He always had an opinion because he's kind of recreating an impression of his childhood. So it makes it very, a filmmaker-driven project is a wonderful thing.
absolutely.
And I think the medium of animation is really, really good at that, right? Because it lends itself to being molded by that director's vision. So if you've got a director with a really strong vision, you can really shape every single aspect of like what you were describing about Spider-Verse, right? Where you can't do anywhere near that level of creative control with a live action film. You know?
Yeah, I was just gonna say about Mitchell's too, Kurt. It's like the idea always came from Mike wanting to tell a story about his crazy family, and these movies take years and years and years to make, and they can go in so many different directions. But the North Star of that story was always kind of the family first idea, and it was specific to like Mike's experiences. So you go one way, you go another, but you always remember this is supposed to be about the family. That's what attracted us to this personal story in the first place, and you never want to lose that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Kevin?
From scratch up on your own?
Well, for me, I worked on it on only that, so that's super personal to me. But yeah, I think it came out at a weird time because of the pandemic. So like Spider-Verse had this big explosion in theaters and all that, and Mitchell's didn't get that because it came out on Netflix. But the campaign that Netflix put on to get it out there was remarkable. So we felt the same sort of like, this is amazing. You know, we're getting to show the film to the whole. I think it was like 300 million people could see it
around for decades.
So it's like we did something really
great.
It's just crazy.
Can we go back and do it again?
But yes,
on an original story
I think
from
the studio
a friend of ours on a road trip talking about
and
this
Phil and
crazy
Chris,
family
who
and
Phil
robots.
Lord and
Like,
Chris
did
Miller,
it
who
feel a
produced
little
both
bit
of
different
the
when that movie
movies,
came out? That
feel
you guys
proud
really
of both
just
of
did
them.
that
But
one
Mitchell's is
from
because it
scratch
was
up on your
Mike's family. It has this personal aspect that Spider-Verse doesn't, because you know, we don't own Miles Morales, and the world does. So it was very personal, and I think it carried that with the crew within the studio, and I think that you worked on it. It felt really good in reviews. Like there was a lot of fun to work on.
Absolutely. Like, I'll let you on a little secret. I don't know how I'm gonna react to a film until I see it in the cinema. I work on these films, right? Most of the time, I have no idea if they're gonna be a good film. Like, I have an inkling. I have maybe this is gonna be good, but I don't know. And when I saw Mitchell's, I was like, holy cow, this is an awesome film. And I had same reaction to Spider-Verse. When I was working on it, I was like, how are people gonna react to this? This is so odd.
Yeah.
Right, and then when I saw it for the first time, I remember turning to my wife after like 10 minutes of the film and going, this is actually pretty good.
Pav, do you think that's also because by nature of what your job is, you're doing it shot by shot, and you're also working sequentially, so you're just focused on this amazing effect.
That's exactly it.
And then you're doing something in Act 3, and then you're doing something in Act 1, so you get to see, you don't get to see the movie until you finally see the assembly of all of your parts.
100%. I think it's partly that, but it's also because I don't have the training that you guys have of looking past all the unpolished parts of the film. Like, for example, I'll see storyboards of the film, and I'm like, is this good? I don't know. I can't picture the end product. Whereas I think you guys have that skill of being able to see, what is this going to look like when it's done? You know,
we still don't know sometimes.
You just squint. It's like, barely look at it.
When you're working on a movie, you don't know if it's good. You're looking at it close to one part.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but that's where having a really good director on board, like Mike and Chris, Phil, those guys, they've got a really strong vision, right? They know exactly what they want, And it's good that they don't get caught up in the small details because they need to keep their eye on the bigger picture. Yeah.
I do love, though, your honest answer of like when you're working on a movie, you don't know if it's good because you're looking at it close up in one part of it. Because when we've all seen a horrible movie and the credits are 15 minutes long, you're like, so 5,000 people worked on this and one of them didn't go, I think this is a turd. But you can see how that could happen if you're only seeing one little piece of it.
I have a lot to say about this. Do you guys want to start first? No, sure. Okay, all right. So AI is going to be huge, and I know that sounds like a cliche, but we're already seeing it with like text to image. Pretty soon we're going to see text to animation, which we're already starting on a little bit.
And whoever
but I
wants
think
to
it's
get
going to be a
into
great
this
thing because it's
can.
going to
Each of you started in
democratize
live, and you
animation. And I think
transitioned
more
over to
people
animation.
kind of like.
I'm
just
sure
look
right
around
now
here, right?
we have
all the
lots of
amazing
people
stuff
that
people are
have only
doing.
ever been
It's
in
because they have
animation.
access
Because
to
it's scaling,
technology
it's
that
growing.
didn't
There's
exist
studios
like 10
that
years
only
ago,
do that. There's
5
streaming
years
services
ago.
that only
So I think
handle animation.
We'll see
So
more and more
I'm
animation
curious to see
becoming
where this
available
industry
to kind
will
of
go,
like
say,
the bar will
in
be
2
lower.
decades, when it's 20 years of filmmakers that have only ever known this, and it wasn't a transition from someplace else. Please do. Yes, you are right.
I think there's so much more for them to be inspired to now.
Yep.
By there's just so much animation and art out there, and it's like you're saying, the barrier to entry to creating it is dropping all the time. So I think it's only gonna get better, really.
Oh yeah. Right, right. I mean, that creates, too much inventory, but it also bursts the next stars of the genre that maybe aren't in the wrong scene, don't know the right people, and can never get their
places
story
you can see
in front of folks
animation
like
now.
you. So it'll definitely be interesting
like
to see where that goes.
Kids,
I
you
agree.
went to the theater, or it was on television when it came on TBS or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Now it's everywhere. It's on your phone. It's your friend can make it for you. The audience can be one. It doesn't have to be millions. So it's just a very different space than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah,
then
I
you
mean,
also
look,
see
like these
as
guys saying, the
barrier
entry points
entry
for
is
how you can
dropping,
get into animation is different.
expectations are
The
opening
different
up. Like, think
mediums
about
that
all
you
of
can
us when we were
do,
10
or
years
sorry,
old,
the
what we
different,
thought
just
we
the
would
different
get if we
kinds
clicked
of
play,
things you can do
or
within the
were
medium are interesting.
shown
'cause
animation. We didn't click play on anything.
there was a time
But now
probably,
it's also like
and
some
we're
things
still
are drawn
dealing
really
with
crude.
it now,
Some things are
where
very
it's like,
raunchy. You know what I mean?
okay,
Just the
animation
whole
is just
scope is
kid
blowing
stuff
open,
or
where it
whatever, and
literally
that
does
might
feel
not
like
appeal
anything
to
is
everybody
possible
that
for
wants
any
to tell
audience.
stories. Now it can be all kinds of different stories. And then I think the other big thing is video games.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's an entryway into animation, and the fact that you can work on games and just be a gamer and a fan of that industry, get into computer graphics that way, and then figure out later, oh, we're just telling stories with the same kind of toolkit that an animated film or show does, and you can cross over, within the medium of animation to a completely different kinds of content. Yeah, that is the challenge. I think too. Video games and animation, even though they're cousins or siblings or whatever, it is one involves the content consumer to have the gameplay and the playability, and the other is like, we're going to tell you a story, sit back and watch and enjoy. But it's, again, all the same toolkit, and it's all different entry points to be able to work within the medium.
You're so right, because I thought one of the most genius things I'd seen in animation was when the studio out of Austin, Texas, Rooster Teeth, they did Red versus Blue, where they used a video game as their animation engine. And I'm like, that's pretty genius to be like, what can we do with the video game that's not actually playing the video game? So you're absolutely right.
You know, I think it's just as these stories evolve and they get and we're able to tell more sophisticated stories within animation, even if it's for kids. I mean, Spider-Verse is a PG movie that's made for families.
So what do you think
the best thing
for you,
about
Kevin,
it,
what do
when
you
we
think the
heard
biggest obstacle
one of the
is
best, most
for
rewarding things
animation
about hearing
to be
the feedback
at the
on Spider-Verse is
theater
all the
day and
adults
day,
that went
and
and
for people
saw
to be
it,
like,
and
that
not because they
movie,
had to bring
like,
a
across a
child
broad
or
scope of
they
people,
wanted to see
that
it because
movie
they
is
love
just as
Spider-Verse,
important
Spider-Man,
as
or
the other
they
title
heard
next
it was
to
a
it
great
with, you know,
movie.
the
I think the
A-list
bar is
celebrities.
really
Like, what
high
do you think
because
that
it's going to
biggest
still take
barrier
people
is
a long
for
time to
people
figure
to
out
really
that like
across the board say,
animation could be for
that movie
everybody. It
is
doesn't
no
have
lesser
to
than the
just
other
be
one just
a
because
family
it's
movie that you
made by
need a family
computers
to
and
watch. But I think
illustrators.
if we keep making good stuff like Spider-Verse, like The Mitchells, many other films, Pixar films, I think people will start to think of those as just movies or just shows, and it's entertainment, and it doesn't have to necessarily be like, oh, look at that. There's no live action humans in that. That's just for children, you know?
Right.
From an old guy's perspective, because we remember when it was looked at differently,
Right.
you know?
No, I think you're right. I think just time will get us there. You know, like there's Spider-Verse is a Marvel movie. Every Marvel movie has a lot of animation in it that just looks very realistic. And I would say that Spider-Verse is one of the best Marvel movies ever made. You know, like put it up against
and
Black
Kurt,
Panther.
don't you
it's
think
really
also
a
gonna
good
be
film.
A generational shift, right?
And
I mean,
I think
if
it
you
just
think
will
about
take,
somebody
like you're
who's
saying, the kids that grew up with
15
this, that
today,
played video games,
they've been submerged in all kinds of
immersively.
animations.
They're
since,
just going to
you know,
appreciate this
the
content.
day that they were given a device or a screen. And as we go on and on, I'm pretty sure we're going to get to a moment where we have a consumer that has just never known that one was less than the other. I mean, we're kind of looking at this a little bit from an old guy's perspective because we remember when it was looked at differently, you know? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You believe so?
I think there's also like before this whole talk came up, I did some research about like movies, the definition of movie. I got
think
some,
one of the best
I got
compliments
some
I
things
can
to
give
say.
Spider-Verse, ignoring how phenomenal it is visually, storytelling, it is aged
It's
so
because
well.
I have a
It was
terrible
ahead of
memory.
its time.
All right,
It
so
seems even
the
different
definition
after
of a movie
2020. Like
and a
that
film,
was a creative
right?
team.
A
Because you know
movie's
that
kind of like
released in
something
what,
that
2018?
has a clear
So they were working
plot.
on that in 2013.
It's
So
story
10
driven.
years ahead
It's
of
got
time. It's
easy
right where it needs
answers.
to be for
Whereas
a sequel
film
in
is something that
2023.
leaves the
And
audience
it doesn't have to
kind of
reinvent
like
itself. This was a
something
little
to think
rough
about.
around the edges when it came out
tries
the
to
first
be
time. Like
talk
it's a
about
very
ideas that
visionary
are bigger than the
project,
film itself.
both in the written word
right?
and the visual
so
images.
if we're
So
talking about
all of
film
you guys should be
versus
proud
movie,
of working on it or being at the company that made it.
animation can be a movie, can be film, right? Because so long as it has that artistic intent, that ambition, that philosophy behind it, that strong.
I see you have your research
story-driven,
in front of you. I'm
like Mitchells
impressed.
versus the Machines, like Spider-Verse.
Every lazy
all that
American
stuff.
I've talked to
So that's
today
kind of like,
had no notebook.
to me, that's the
guy
that's
from
the
Australia is
definition
like,
of a
I
movie.
showed
A
up
movie can
prepared.
definitely be animation. It's regardless of the medium, and that's true of any medium, right? It's true of books. You could have a book that's tries to talk about higher ideas, and a book that's kind of very crass. It's regardless of medium. Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
very
very
much.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.